He expected the inside of the house to look like the outside, a mishmash of architectural atrocities better suited for demolition than habitation. He wasn't disappointed. The light was low, coming from mismatched sconces bolted to the walls and an obscenely large candle sitting on a small table near the door. Plants hung from vaulted ceiling in wicker baskets, and though none of them were flowering, the scent of them was almost overwhelming, mixing with the powerful smell of spices that seemed embedded into the walls. The vines trailed down towards the floor, swaying gently in the breeze through the open window on the far wall. He started to reach for one, suddenly desperate to feel the leaves against his skin, but he curled his hand at the last moment. He could smell them, so he knew they were there even if his eyes were playing tricks on him. And May could touch him. In fact, he could still feel the ghost of her fingers on his skin. But what if that was it? Wallace had never been a man of leisure, stopping to smell the roses, or so the saying went. Doubt, then doubt creeping up on him, sliding over his shoulders and weighing him down, fingers like claws digging in. A dozen tables sat in the middle of a large room, their surfaces gleaming as if freshly wiped down. The chairs tucked underneath were old and worn, though not shabby. They too were mismatched, some with wooden seats and backs, others with thick and faded cushions. He even saw a moon chair in one corner. He hadn't seen one of those since he was a kid. He barely heard May close the door behind them. He was distracted by the walls of the room, his feet moving him towards them of their own violation. They were covered in pictures and posters, some framed, some held up by pushpins. They told a story, he thought, but one he couldn't follow. Here was a picture of a waterfall, the spray catching the sunlight in rainbow fractals. Here was a shot of an island in a cerulean sea, the trees so thick he couldn't see the ground. Here was a gigantic mural of the pyramids, drawn with a deft but unpracticed hand. Here was a photograph of a castle on a cliff, the stone crumbling and being overtaken by moss. Here was a framed photo of a volcano rising above the clouds, lava bursting in hot arcs. Here was a painting of a town in the throes of winter, the lights bright and almost twinkling, reflecting off an unmarked layer of snow. Strangely, they all caused a lump in Wallace's throat. He had never had time for such places, and now he never would. Shaking his head, he moved on, glancing at the fireplace that made up half the wall to his right, the wood shifting as the embers sparked. It was made of white stone, the mantel oak. Atop the mantel were little knickknacks, a wolf carved from stone, a pine cone, a dried rose, a basket of white rocks. Above the fireplace, a clock, but it appeared to be broken. The second hand was twitching, but it never advanced. A high-backed chair sat in front of the fireplace, a heavy blanket hanging off the armrest. It looked welcoming. Wallace glanced to the left to see a counter with a cash register and an empty, darkened display case with little handwritten signs tapped against the glass advertising a dozen different types of pastries. Jars lined the walls behind the counter. Some were filled with thin leaves, others with a powder in various shades. Little handwritten labels sat in front of each one, describing even more varieties of tea. A large chalkboard hung on the wall above the jars, next to a pair of swinging doors with a porthole window. Someone had drawn little deer and squirrels and birds on the chalkboard in green and blue chalk, surrounding a menu that seemed to go on forever. Green and herbal tea, black and oolong, white tea, yellow tea, fermented tea, sencha rose, herba, senna, rooibos, changa tea, chamomile, hibiscus, isak, matcha, moringa, pura, nettle, dandelion tea, and he remembered the graveyard where May had plucked the dandelion puffball from the ground and blown on it, the little white whiffs floating away. They were all printed around a message in the center of the board. The words, written in spiky and slanted letters, read, "The first time you share tea, you are a stranger. The second time you share tea, you are an honored guest. The third time you share tea, you become family." The entire place felt like a fever dream. It couldn't be real. It was too something that Wallace couldn't quite put his finger on. He stopped in front of the display case, staring at the message on the chalkboard, unable to look away. Unable, that was, until a dog ran out of a wall. He shrieked as he stumbled backwards, not believing his eyes. The dog, a large black mutt with a white pattern on its chest that almost looked like a star, rushed toward him, barking its full head off. Its tail swishing furiously, it circled May, back end wiggling as it rubbed up against her. "Who's a good boy?" May cooed in a tone of voice that Wallace despised. "Who's the best boy in the entire world? Is it you? I think it's you." The dog, apparently in agreement that it was the best boy in the entire world, barked cheerfully. Its ears were large and pointed, though the left one flopped over. It collapsed in front of May, rolling over onto its back, legs kicking as May sank to her knees, seeming to disregard the fact that she was wearing a suit. Much to Wallace's consternation, rubbing her hands along its stomach. Its tongue lolled out of its mouth as it looked at Wallace. It rolled back over and climbed to its feet, shaking itself from side to side. And then it jumped on Wallace. He barely got his hands up in time before it crashed into him, knocking him off his feet. He landed on his back, trying to shield his face from the frantic, wet tongue licking all the exposed skin it could find. "Help me," he shouted. "It's trying to kill me." "Yeah," May said. "That's not quite what he's doing. Apollo doesn't kill, he loves." She frowned. "Quite a bit, apparently." "Apollo, no! We don't hump people." And then Wallace heard a dry, rusty chuckle followed by a deep, crackly voice. "Don't usually see him so excited. Wonder why that is." Before Wallace could focus on that, the dog jumped off him and took off towards the closed double doors behind the counters. But rather than pushing the doors open, it went through them, the doors unmoving. Wallace sat up in time to see the tip of its tail disappear, the cable from its chest wrapped around the counter, and he couldn't see where it led to. "What the hell was that?" he demanded, hearing the dog bark somewhere in the house. "That's Apollo," May said. "But he walked through walls." May shrugged. "Well, sure, he's dead, like you." "What?" "Quick one you've got there," that crackly voice said, and Wallace turned his head towards the fireplace. He yelped at the sight of an old man peering around the side of the high back chair. He looked ancient, his dark brown skin heavily wrinkled. He grinned, his strong teeth catching the firelight. His eyebrows were large and bushy, and his white afro sitting on his head looked like a wispy cloud. He smacked his lips as he chuckled again. "Good on you, May. Knew you could do it." May blushed, shuffling her feet. "Thanks. Had a little trouble there at the beginning, but I got it all sorted out." Wallace barely heard her as he continued to mention the sexually aggressive ghost dogs and old men appearing out of nowhere. "I think." The man pushed himself up from the chair. He was short and slightly hunched. If he cleared 5 feet, Wallace would be surprised. He wore flannel pajamas and an old pair of slippers. A cane leaned against the side of a chair. The old man groaned and grabbed it and shuffled forward. He stopped next to May, squinting down at Wallace on the floor. He tapped the end of his cane against Wallace's ankle. "Ah," he said, "I see." Wallace didn't want to know what he saw. He should have never followed May into the tea shop. The man said, "Kinda squirrely, ain't ya?" He tapped the cane against Wallace again. Wallace batted it away. "Would you stop that?" The man didn't stop that. In fact, he did it once more, trying to make a point. "What are you?" And then Wallace knew. This had to be Hugo, the man May brought him to see. The man who wasn't God, but something she'd call a ferryman. Wallace didn't know what he was expecting. Perhaps a man in white robes and a long flowing beard surrounded by blazing light, a wooden staff instead of a cane. This man looked at least 1,000 years old. He had a presence about him, or something Wallace couldn't quite place. It was calming, or so close to it that it didn't matter. Maybe this was part of the process, what May had called the transition. Wallace wasn't sure why he needed to be beaten with a cane, but if Hugo deemed it necessary, then who was Wallace to say otherwise? The man pulled the cane back. Do you understand now? No, he really didn't. I think so. Hugo nodded. Good. Up, up. Shouldn't stay on the floor. Gets drafty. Don't want you to catch your death. He cackled as if it were the funniest thing in the world. Wallace laughed too, though it was incredibly forced. Ha ha, yeah, that's hysterical. I get it. Jokes. You tell jokes. Hugo's eyes twinkled with an undisguised mirth. It helps to laugh, even when you don't feel like laughing. You can't be sad when you're laughing, mostly. Wallace rose to his feet, eyeing the two in front of him warily. He brushed himself off, aware of how ridiculous he looked. He pushed himself to his full height, squaring his shoulders. In life, he'd been an intimidating man. Just because he was dead didn't mean he was going to get jerked around. He said, My name is Wallace. The man said, Tall fella, ain't ya? Wallace blinked. I guess. The man nodded. In case you didn't know, how's the weather up there? Wallace stared down at him. What? May covered her mouth with her hand, but not before Wallace could see the smile growing. The man, Hugo, God, shuffled forward, knocking his cane against Wallace's leg as he circled around him. Uh-huh. Okay, I see. So, right. We can work with this, I think. He reached up and pinched Wallace's side. Wallace yelped, knocking his hand away. Hugo shook his head as he completed his circle, once again standing next to May, resting his cane. Hell of a first case to get assigned, May. Right? But I think I'm getting through to him. She glanced at Wallace with a frown. Maybe. You didn't do anything, Wallace snapped. Hugo nodded. This one's gonna give us trouble. Wait and see. He grinned, the lines around his eyes cavernous. I like the ones who cause trouble. Wallace bristled. My name is Wallace Price. I'm an attorney from... Hugo ignored him, looking at May and smiling. How was your trip, dear? Got a little lost, did you? Yeah, May said. The world is bigger than I remember, especially going on my own. It usually is, Hugo said. That's the beauty of it. But you're home now, so don't you worry. Hopefully you won't get sent out right away. May nodded as she stretched her arms above her head, back popping loudly. No place like home. Wallace tried again. I told you I died from a heart attack. I'd like to lodge a formal complaint, seeing as how he's taking to being dead pretty well, Hugo said, eyeing Wallace up and down. Usually there's screaming and yelling and threats. I like it when they threaten. Oh, he had his moments, May said. But on the whole, not too bad. Guess where I found him? Hugo eyed Wallace up and down. Then, where he died. No, wait, at his home, trying to figure out why he couldn't make things work. His funeral, May said, and Wallace was offended by how gleeful she sounded. No, Hugo breathed. Really? Sitting in a pew and everything? Wow, Hugo said. That's embarrassing. I'm standing right here, Wallace snapped. Of course you are, Hugo said, not unkindly. But thank you for making that known. Look, Hugo, May said you could help me. She said she had to bring me here to you because you're the ferryman, and you're supposed to do something. I admit I wasn't really paying attention to that part, but that is beside the point. I don't know what kind of bracket you're running here, and I don't know who put you up to this, but I would really rather not be dead if at all possible. I have far too much work to do, and this has been an awful inconvenience. I have clients. I have a brief due by the end of the week that can't be delayed, he groaned, mind racing, and I'm supposed to be in court on Friday for a hearing that I can't miss. Do you know who I am? Because if you do, then you know I don't have time for this. I have responsibilities, yes, extremely important responsibilities that can't be ignored. Of course I know who you are, Hugo said dryly. You're Wallace. Relief like he'd never before experienced washed over him. He'd come to the right person. May, whoever or whatever she was, seemed to be an underling, a drone. Hugo was in position of power. Always speak to the manager to get results. Good, then you understand that this won't do at all. So if you could do whatever you need in order to fix this, I would be greatly appreciative. And then, just because he couldn't be absolutely sure this man wasn't God, he added, "Please, thank you, sir." Huh, Hugo said. That was a bit of a word salad. He tends to do that, May whispered loudly. Probably because he was a lawyer. The old man eyed Wallace up and down. Called me Hugo. You hear that? I did, May said. Maybe we should. Hugo Freeman, at your service. He bowed as low as he could. May sighed. Or we could do it this way. Hugo snorted. Learn to have a little fun. It doesn't always have to be doom and gloom. Now, where were we? Ah, yes, I'm Hugo, and you're upset because you're dead. But not because of friends or family or such other drivel, but because you have work to do, and this is an inconvenience. He paused, considering. An awful inconvenience. Wallace was relieved. He expected more of a fight. He was pleased he didn't have to resort to threats of legal action. Exactly. That's exactly it. Hugo shrugged. All right. Really? He could be back into the office by tomorrow afternoon at the latest. Maybe the day after, depending how long it took him to get home. He'd have to demand that May bring him back, as he didn't have his wallet. If push came to shove, he'd phone the firm and have his assistant buy him a plane ticket. But something so trivial wouldn't stop Wall's price. As a last resort, he could take the bus, but he wanted to avoid it if he could. He'd had almost a week's worth to catch up on, but it was a small price to pay. He'd have to find a way to explain the whole funeral open casket thing, but he'd figure it out. Naomi would be disappointed she wasn't getting anything from his estate, but screw her, she'd been mean at the funeral. Okay, he said. I'm ready. How do we do this? Do you chant or something? Sacrifice a goat? He grimaced. I really hope you don't have to sacrifice a goat. I get squeamish around blood. You're in luck, Hugo said. We're fresh out of goats. Wall sagged. Great, I'm ready to be alive again. I learned my lesson. I promised to be nicer to people and blah blah blah. The joy I feel knows no bounds, Hugo said. Raise your arms above your head. Wallace did just that. Now jump up and down. Wallace did, the cable rising and falling from the floor. Repeat after me. I want to be alive. I want to be alive. Hugo sighed. You gotta really. Hugo sighed. You gotta mean it. Really? Let me hear it. Make me believe. I want to be alive, Wallace shouted as he jumped up and down, arms above his head. I want to be alive. I want to be alive. There it is, Hugo cried. I can feel something happening. It's really coming. Keep going. Jump in circles. I want to be alive, Wallace bellowed as he jumped in a circle. I want to be alive. I want to be alive. And stop. Whatever you do, don't move. Wallace froze, arms above his head, one leg raised, his flip-flop dangling off his foot. He could feel it working. He didn't know how, but he did. Soon this would all be over, and he'd go back to living. Hugo's eyes widened. Stay like that until I say so. Don't even blink. Wallace didn't. He stayed exactly as he was. He'd do anything to make this right again. Hugo nodded. Good. Now I want you to repeat after me. Again. I am an idiot. I am an idiot. And I'm dead. And I'm dead. And there's no way for me to come back to life because that's not how it works. And there's. What? Hugo doubled over, breathing out, creating laughter. Oh my. You should see the look on your face. It's priceless. The skin under Wallace's right eye twitched as he lowered his arm slowly, putting his foot back onto the floor. What? You're dead, Hugo explained. You can't be brought back to life. That's not how anything works, honestly. He elbowed May in the side. You see this? What a goof. I like him. It'll be a shame to see him go. He's fun. May glanced towards the double doors. You're going to get us in trouble, Nelson. Bah, death doesn't need to always be sad. We need to learn to laugh at ourselves before we... Nelson, Wallace said slowly. The man looked at him. Yes? She called you Nelson. That's because it's my name. Not Hugo? Nelson waved his hand. Hugo is my grandson. He narrowed his eyes. And you won't tell him what we did if you know what's good for you. Wallace gaped at him. Are you serious? As a heart attack, Nelson said as May choked. Oops, too soon. Wallace took a stuttering step towards the man, to do what he didn't know. He couldn't think, he couldn't form a single word. He tripped over his own feet, falling forward towards Nelson, eyes wide. A sound like a door creaking escaped his throat. But he didn't crash into Nelson, because Nelson disappeared, causing Wallace to stand roughly on the floor, face down. He raised his head in time to see Nelson blink back into existence a few feet away, near the fireplace. He wiggled his fingers at Wallace. Wallace rolled over onto his back, staring up at the ceiling. His chest heaved. Pesky thing, that, seeing how his lungs weren't exactly necessary at this point, and his skin thrummed. You're dead. As a door now, Nelson said. It was a relief, really. This old body has worn down, and try as I might, I couldn't make it lurk like I wanted to anymore. Sometimes death is a blessing, even if we don't realize it right away. Another voice came then, deep and warm, the words sounding as if they had weight, and there was a mighty tug at the hook in Wallace's chest. It should have hurt. It didn't. It almost felt like relief. Granddad, are you making trouble again? Wallace turned his head towards the voice. A man appeared through the double doors. Wallace blinked slowly. The man smiled quietly, his teeth shockingly bright. The front two were a bit crooked and strangely charming. He was perhaps an inch or two shorter than Wallace, with thin arms and legs. He wore jeans and an open-collared shirt under an apron with the words Charon's Crossing stitched across the front. The front of an apron bulged slightly against the gentle sway of his stomach. His skin was deep brown, his eyes almost hazel, with shots of green through them. His hair was similar to the old man's, tight coils in a short afro. Though his was black, he seemed young, not quite as young as May, but surely younger than Wallace. The floorboards creaked with every step he took. He set down the tray he was carrying onto the counter, a teapot clinking against the oversized teacups. It smelled like peppermint. He walked around the counter. Wallace saw the dog, Apollo, weaving around and then through the man's legs. The man laughed at the dog. I could see that. Curious, right? The dog barked in agreement. Wallace stared as the man approached. He didn't know why he was focused on the man's hands. Fingers oddly delicate, palms paler than the backs, nails like crescent moons. He rubbed his hands together before he crouched down near Wallace, keeping some distance from him as he thought Wallace was skittish. It was only then Wallace noticed the cable attached to his chest extended to the man, though there didn't appear to be a hook. The cable disappeared into his rib cage, where his heart should be. Hello, the man said. Wallace, right? Wallace Price? Wallace nodded, unable to find his voice. The man's smile widened, and the hook in Wallace's chest felt like it was burning. My name is Hugo Freeman. I am a ferryman. I'm sure you have questions. I'll do my best to answer them all. But first things first, would you like a cup of tea?